Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the pregame show of the Candid Conversations. I know many of you have been writing in, sending us letters, emails.
Us
Um,
for us to come
I don't,
back.
what do they call tweets? Like I know it's X, but do they still call them tweets? I don't know. We've been
It's,
getting a lot of demand.
it's Instagram. We've been on the gram. People have been
We
watching it,
well,
wanting to know where we are. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. So, Mark Gorman with my incredible co-host, Brenda.
Hi,
Um, so why don't we jump into it? We have a few minutes.
welcome back. This is our first. We are transitioning. For those of you who've been with us for a while, know that during the COVID years, we did Candid Conversations and we had an in-person media ad sale summit annually, and we're transitioning back to Candid Conversations, a couple virtual ones during the year and a couple still in person, tied to key events in the industry, probably a little smaller than the annual summit, but we certainly do want to get face to face with people, but we also want to have more time with people, and so we decided that the candid conversations are back. They're well attended, and we have a tremendous panel and conversation lined up for today. But Mark, what's new since we've last
Well,
spoke
why
in
don't you talk? I know you are thoroughly obsessed
I am
with
obsessed
the
with this.
Paramount deal. You have some opinions.
I don't want to say what my opinion is necessarily, but I have been transfixed on following the Paramount saga deal opportunities, if you will, throughout the past, I guess, almost a year. And it's still, it's still Paramount's still out there. No buyers, no confirmed deal. So I find it interesting. It's maybe the state of the industry, right? And Paramount has a lot of things. They've got the network, they've got production, and they also have owned and operated stations. So it's been very interesting to me, and I think somewhat of this is the industry we are in right now.
Sure. You were talking earlier about what you had read in Puck, the idea that I forget what you call it, the committee is still evaluating other deals that still
Yep.
exist.
Yep. Special committee for sure. Yeah,
It,
they're
it,
still
it
out there.
it's interesting to me because I think one thing that came up is the idea of, well, I'll give my opinion. First of all, I think whatever deal ends up, if they say, well, this is a good deal or there's something that needs to be moved forward, I think Sherry's not going to have any choice
Yeah.
because I'm actually surprised lawsuits haven't already been filed against her. I mean, I find what she has done to be pretty, I mean, we can call it unethical, but potentially illegal. I mean, minority shareholders do still have rights. As a majority shareholder, you can't breach your fiduciary duty to the rest of the people. So I think it will be interesting to see what happens. But I do wonder because I know Apollo, I think the rumor is they're still out there for the O and O's. Is that right?
Yeah, parts of it. They've got a deal going with Sony, or and there are Sony clearly wants the production,
Yeah.
the studio, and I think Apollo, as we know from our client base, has some, local stations in their portfolio. So I would assume that they would be interested in the stations.
I think it would be interesting because if you look at the current state of local, there's so S&P and Brenda and I, for people who don't know, we both grew up in finance in career wise. And there's, at least historically, there was always a saying that the debt markets are smarter than the equity markets. And so if you look at S&P, for example, S&P on the debt side believes that the larger, more diversified local broadcasters are in a much better position than smaller ones like a CMG, the Apollo Holdings. And in fact, it would be interesting because Apollo's a big LBO shop, how they would finance this, given that CMG's own debt, I think their senior secured debt is rated B minus, and their senior unsecured debt is at junk levels. How are you going to raise? I just wonder how you're going to raise. Sure, it's Apollo, and they probably have some sway in getting debt. On the other hand, banks just don't give out money, and they may be very nervous about giving more debt to finance additional broadcasters. Because even if you look at other broadcasters, pretty much almost all of them have negative views on their outlook. Though I would say, listen, CMG is not a public company, so there's no stock. I mean, from the public side, we see a massive dichotomy between the better performing stocks of broadcasters versus some others, like a Scripps, which I think is down almost 72% from a year ago, which is just brutal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, listen, you and I both know we love this, and look, there's a lot going on, right? There's the whole, there's an election, and in addition to the political spend that an election brings, it also could bring a difference of opinion in how the DOJ, the federal FCC, the FTC all view, mergers and acquisitions. Sony is clearly not a U.S.-based company, so there's always that as well. And to your point, in the local space, which we certainly are clients, and we want to see these guys grow and expand their share of ad spend. It's changing. Streamers are everywhere, right? Sure. I was at an event last week in New York, and it was cable backed, but it was ad spend was not something that they weren't familiar with, but everything is program driven, supported, ad supported was very important, but subscription was also there, and we all know BritBox happened to be one of the groups, and we all know what I feel about BritBox. I love that. So anyway, we all know that changing industry, but there is a massive political spend coming this year for the presidential election and a few not a few key Senate races, and then there's the Olympics too. So there are clearly, you would think, ways that ad revenue will increase, although most people are not predicting massive increase in revenues in ad revenue this in 24. So interesting, right? But and then again, there's always those streamers out there. So it'll be interesting with not only our clients, but the industry as a whole, what happens.
Of course. And my feeling with local. Local has something, I mean, we have clients across all types. But of course, our biggest exposure client-wise is local. I have said this a ton of times. I think that local has something that no one else has. The networks, even Paramount Plus, whatever. How are you different than a Netflix, than an Amazon? You're really not. But local does have a certain reach and could have the ability to start producing content locally that is really relevant. And I'll say a final, thought here is the S&P. I do agree size does somewhat matter here because there are synergies that you could gain across your base. And I personally believe that they should be able to consolidate, but that's for another conversation.
Let's our maybe we weren't as fun as excited, but we both love the whole market of the financial and that conversation. But turning it over now, we have and we potentially could ask one of our panelists, who's coming up, what he thinks of the options to buy some local stations.
Exactly.
But we have a tremendous candid conversation today. Data visualization. Paige Albiniak is our moderator. Tremendous. Princell, president of Allen Media, a Lustgarten industry consultant, and Nicole, Bergen, who's the founder and strategic director of Elevate. Tremendous conversation coming up. So we'll kick it off and we'll get that conversation started. Good to see you, Mark.
You too. Super excited. Caitlin, take us out.
everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Mark and Brenda, for that interesting conversation. I could definitely roll with that also for a while. Some interesting topics there. But today we are talking about data visualization. We do have a great panel. And one thing I really love about this group is that we have very distinct representation from three key segments to cover this topic. So I think this will be interesting. Brenda already introduced, but I'm going to do it again. So we have Princell. He is president of Allen Media Broadcasting. We have Al Lustgarten. He is an industry consultant and the former senior vice president of technology at Hearst Television. And we have Nicole Bergen, founder, chief strategist at Elevate. So hi, guys. All right, we're going to start by defining our terms. I like to kind of lay a foundation before we get into the conversation. So I'm going to start with Nicole. And just, Nicole, tell me how you see data visualization. What does that mean? And what is it? What is the definition? What does it look like?
So in the simplest terms, and thank you for having me today, Paige. Data visualization is the graphical representation of information and data. Okay. Why is it necessary in the current day? I'll give you two words: digital pollution. There's so much coming at decision makers on a daily basis. The average business owner, key stakeholder, gets over 100 emails a day. And that's not including calls, social DMs. There's just a lot of noise. So I'm really glad to be here to talk about this topic today because it's really important for another specific reason. Of course, I'm the data nerd here, and I got to cite some data points. 65% of America learns through visuals. So this is when you throw data at people, tables, numbers, the majority of learners don't know where to look. And that's why data visualization is so important.
Okay. One thing I forgot to mention, so let me say this now, is if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A panel. I have it open. You need to be signed in, and I need to be able to see your name in order for the question to appear. If you're on anonymously, it won't show up, but feel free to ask questions along the way. I will try to get to them. We only have 40 minutes, though. Okay, so I'm going to kick it now to Al. So looking at how Nicole defined that and talked about it, when you consider what broadcasters and local media businesses do with their data, is this something that you think that they are doing? And if so, are they technologically prepared to do it?
Yeah, well, local broadcasters are faced with an overwhelming amount of data that they have to sort through and consume. Much of that data resides in legacy proprietary systems, so it's a challenge to get at that data. So there is, an opportunity for people to work within those systems, obtain the data, normalize it, aggregate it, put it into some type of tool, which will enable them to not only merge all the information together, but present it in a way that's highly effective in helping the decision support process. So that's the key. I think broadcasters have traditionally lived in a world where they were retrospectively looking at pacing reports and overnight ratings and looking at that. I think we're moving to a world where the data is becoming more actionable in real time. And then to Nicole's point, having that data in a graphical format, which makes it easy. And I think one of the other key points I'd add to what Nicole said is that data becomes sortable, filterable. And what that does is allow for people to do self-service and consume the data the way they want so that they can get the information they are looking for to make decisions.
Al, can you also say, you mentioned some of it, like overnight ratings, obviously, but what is some of the key data that broadcasters in particular are looking at right now that maybe they weren't using in the past?
The local broadcast side of this is pretty straightforward. There's the traditional advertising data coming from the legacy over-the-air broadcast stations. There's the digital data, the impression data, the delivery data that's coming from Google and other providers. There's the audience data coming from Nielsen or ComScore, and that all has to get aggregated together, and it's all disparate data coming from disparate sources that somehow needs to be tied together into a package so it can be presented appropriately.
Okay, and Princell, I'm not ignoring you, but one more question to Nicole really quick, and then I'll kick to you. So, Nicole, what data do you think that broadcasters and other local media businesses like radio, et cetera, should be using that maybe they aren't?
That they aren't.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like attribution, is that really in use as much as it should be? Engagement, think, those kind of advanced advertising metrics that maybe they get discussed, but are people really incorporating them into their day to day?
I think it's a training issue. There's so much being asked of local media right now to be an expert on a lot of pillars. So there's optimization analytics, there's front end analytics, there's planning analytics. There's so many different sources of analytics. I don't think there's a lack of abundance of analytics. It's how do you bring all of those things together? So I think local media would say, that they have an abundance of data. It's just the brain power and the tools to dissect it and make it all coagulate, if you will.
Okay, so this is where I call in Princell, who runs a group of local stations. So can you talk about what this looks like for you guys and sort of what are your pain points in this area?
Well, look, we get a daily report card in a lot of our markets from Nielsen. We have a sense of who's watching and kind of how the audience travels throughout the broadcast day. The pain points really are for us. There's just the accuracy and the accuracy of measurement, and that's been a pain point for some time, and we've now had several different companies kind of come in and into the space and offer different ways of measuring, like a video amp or a ComScore, competitors to Nielsen. But with each one of those systems, there's something that doesn't quite complete the process or doesn't quite add up, and it's almost like you have to kind of use multiple measuring sources in order to kind of come up with whatever the complete picture is of who your audience is.
And then, Princell, do you guys use dashboards or graphical representations to better understand that information, or is that a direction in which you are heading?
Definitely a direction that we're heading. We do in some cases. I loved Nicole's stat off the top. 65% of people learn through visualization, and broadcasters are the same way. In fact, we may be more visually adept. So it's something that we definitely use throughout the building in our stations.
It's funny because I don't think I've done a webinar in many years that did not include this issue of accuracy of measurement. It's a well-covered topic and a subject of entire webinars and conferences, really. But I do think, it's interesting because you're with these different piles of data and they aren't even like matching up with what they're telling you. So it's complex. I'm going to kick back to you, Al. So at least from I know you are not representing Hearst in this conversation, but from your experience, do you find that broadcasters are using dashboards, using these tools? Is it something they can use? Because as you mentioned, they have these legacy systems, so they don't really lend themselves to these tools. Do they have the experience and ability in-house to even compile data in this way?
Yeah, the answer is yes, that everybody's finding their own way. Most companies have similar, if not the same, legacy platforms in place. They're getting their data from the same sources. The industry has been working on standard protocols and APIs to try to make it easier for those systems to interact and for the information to be surfaced. And then the tools are becoming more affordable and more common. Whether you're a Microsoft shop or a Google shop or whatever you are, the tools are available, and the cost of implementing this has become lower as time has gone by. The complexity of this is still very high, and most people struggle to do this on their own. They look for help from others to try to determine the path forward. But it's certainly something that is achievable And then, most companies have expertise in one platform or another, whether you're an Oracle shop or an SAP shop or a Salesforce shop. So most people are leveraging the expertise that already exists within their organization to help them come up with solutions that can provide the insights into the data that they're looking for.
Okay. Okay. So Nicole, to prepare yourself, but Nicole has an example of what this might look like for people, which I think is really interesting and helpful. So I was wondering, Nicole, if you could show us and kind of walk us through your example.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So this is our dashboard. We filter consumer insights for regional advertisers, helping them measure their brand health and awareness. Now, I could just give them a table and say, here's your metrics, but most people would look at that and go, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to focus on here. And I think someone, maybe Al mentioned it, like the flexibility of being able to use data in a storytelling environment. So right now you can see we're looking at brand health and awareness for some aesthetic brands and in the ways in which consumers are familiar with these brands. So, but in the dashboard over here on the right, you can select filters. And this is where we need to make it really easy for people to tell stories. I'm going to look at higher income earners. I update the dash and I see this brand has 24% awareness, but maybe I want to go back to the base total. I'm at 28. So I can start to, as a marketer, as a seller, as a executive leader, I can jump into these metrics and they're very approachable. The dash makes it really easy. And you can see how it's visualized here in lots of color, which is how people consume information, is through visuals, as I previously stated.
Nicole, what are the different emojis that you're using? Is there any interesting ones there that you have?
Well, we like to have fun over here at Elevate because data can get boring and we like to try to make it fun. So when we look, rather than using boring net promoter scores, just share my screen again. Ambassadors are people who love brands, right? I could just say, here's your net promoter score, and that's really boring. But we use these little emojis to sort of bring the story to life. You see the little angry face, the can't-sumers. Those are people that don't like this company and they can never consider doing business with them. Like that relates to a business owner. They're like, oh, what's my consumer number? Or sleepers. Oh, they've probably been exposed to your advertising, but they don't really know much about you. Like I can start to wrap my head around those data points with those emojis. They bring emotion to the data point. So I'm glad you caught your attention, Al.
A lot of people use a red light, green light, amber light to just be a barometer of this. It to your point, it adds a lot more interest when you put something that attracts people's attention a little bit more precisely.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we do this for ad testing. There's lots of different ways we test ads, whether it be radio, video, direct mail. But what's the bottom line, the speedometer? Is this ad going to work or not? Maybe it's kind of in the middle, but ads over here in this moving towards the red, maybe not so much. So and he didn't know that I was going to show this. So he set me up for that, Al.
Nicole, would you say that this kind of dashboard, so for broadcasters particularly, this information needs to be acted on very quickly. You need to sort of input, maybe not in all cases, but let's say you're inputting overnight ratings or you're running a campaign on your website or on your 24/7 streaming channel and you want to know, is this ad working? Should I pull it? Should I switch it, etc.? How quickly can this information be imported and acted upon in the kind of format that you just showed us?
For us, 3 days, but we've made the investment in building a dash. And this is where I think there's huge opportunity. To an earlier point, there's an abundance of data, but aggregating it and putting it into a format that's digestible is the next layer that local media needs to address because, again, there's not a lack of data. It's coming from too many sources.
So Princell, do you guys use dashboards? Probably not like that, but do you guys use dashboards? And I mean, is 3 days fast enough for you, or do you need this information digested more quickly?
So we do use dashboards across the company. The speed with which we are able to get the information aggregated and turn it into an effective plan, it definitely needs to happen quicker in order for us to react quicker. I mean, when you think about kind of when you think about the consumer and how quickly they're moving and how quickly they're reacting and how quickly they're adopting new platforms. I feel like, we sometimes are behind the eight ball because of our inability to really kind of take this data and very quickly digest it.
And then is it different for you guys on the digital side versus the linear side? Meaning, can you process and act on data more quickly when it's coming in from the digital side versus what has to happen on the linear side?
Yeah, so this is one of those situations where linear follows digital. On the digital side, we have access to a ton of data through Google Analytics and other other vendors, and we're able to kind of take that data and very quickly kind of put it into some sort of graphical presentation or a chart and make decisions based on that. And that's just because of the availability of that data. And on the linear side, it's a little more cumbersome. Al used the phrase earlier, legacy something.
Proprietary legacy.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what we're dealing with. So digital is, I think, far ahead and outperforming, as it relates to the digestion of data.
And
this is the unending problem.
If you want the technical explanation of this, these proprietary systems require that the data be extracted from them, that data be moved to some kind of data mart where the data is normalized so it can be presented properly. Then it has to be imported into the dashboard. The simple part is the presentation. The hard part is getting the data and getting it in a format. And best case scenario, most cases, you can get that overnight and then get the data the next morning for presentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, kicking back to Nicole. So you just showed us that dashboard, but something else I think you guys do that's interesting is take various, groups of data and overlay it to tell a news story. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you guys go through that process at Elevate.
I think mapping is a common term people hear and have certain impressions of, but is a very effective tool to visualize data, especially when you have large amounts of it and you're cross-tabbing multiple data points. So if you could layer in an audience, reach on top of where people are buying cars, on top of where people are searching right now for that product or service, and you can look for the red areas of the map, if you will. That is a really effective way of bringing multiple data points together at the same time. Something that's been coming up in our world a lot is there's some certain parts of the country, like let's say Jacksonville or Salt Lake City, where there's a ton of transplants. So a lot of people moving to those areas. And so what does this data look like with people that have only been living in this area for less than a year versus the incumbent, residents that have been here living their whole life? And you can layer those things. So mapping is a very common way of doing that and effective way of visualizing data from multiple crosstabs.
And then Princell, is that also something that you guys currently do at Allen?
What's that, Paige?
In terms of, do you also overlay data and so that you can sort of see, how things are interacting?
Yeah, I think, look, drilling down to exactly the consumer that's watching your broadcast and what their needs are, what their likes are, dislikes, any information that you can use in order to kind of get to that sweet spot, if you will, where you can walk into the newsroom and you can ask your 5 o'clock producer, okay, who are you programming to? What stories are going to resonate with that particular person who has, who drives a Ford and, eats lunch at Applebee's? I mean, it's those kinds of things we do. We try to kind of narrow it down as best we can because, as someone said earlier, there's so much fragmentation that's going on that in order for you to really, effectively reach your audience, you got to know what they want.
So would you say that you guys are actually operating at that level of granularity right now, or would you say that's sort of where you're hoping to end up?
I think it's aspirational on the local side. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Mhm.
And if you look at, kind of different genres, I spent, 12 years in sports, and in the sports world, we were very, very consumed with, who that sports audience is, and why are they watching the sports? Why are they fans of the team? What are they not getting, from ESPN or what have you? So I think it just kind of depends on genre. But in the local business, I believe that it's probably more aspirational.
Do you think, and to start staying with you, Princell, and then I'll go
Yeah.
to Al, but do you think that if the business went all the way to where we really only dealing in impressions and we weren't really dealing with ratings anymore, if that ever happens, would that help you get to that place? Do you think we need to get rid of is the right term, but do you think we need to move past ratings to get to a place where measurement can be better and more dynamic?
Dynamic's a good word. I think that, when you talk about impressions versus ratings, and impressions I think from an accuracy standpoint, I think impressions are really where the business needs to move to,
Mhm.
because it's a much more deliberate action. And I think that will help tremendously as we try and figure out how to measure this audience.
Okay, so what I want to ask now, but it's not answerable, which is what is the holdup? Like, why can't we just get to impressions? But that's another 4-day discussion. But Al, I just want you to weigh in on this impressions versus ratings conversation and where do you think stations are in this process? Can they actually get to the place where we will only be in impressions? And do they have the systems in place to get there?
I don't have a lot of insight into where we are currently, but the notion that impression data is going to be there merged with audience data, and there could be a calculation of how an audience converts to an impression, is just leading us towards more data and
Mhm.
more data driven insights into what the audience looks like, and how effective our content and our ads are, appealing to those audience. So I think that the answer is it's going to make a difference. And the notion that we could get to a common currency, and that current currency could produce data and data insights more effectively than where we are today, I think is a very good outcome for us to aspire to.
Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is your belief that we're going to get there?
I'm sure we're going to get there, but it's going to be a slow roll. So I would put it at a 6 or 7. So
Oh, it's 6 or
I
7.
think there's two
Okay.
different questions, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to get there? Heck yeah, we're going to get there. How long is it going to take is a different question.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What else about this, Nicole? Like, how do you see this impressions ratings conversation?
I mean, I think we'll get there. It's just bringing the tech along, bringing the community along. It's the agency's acceptance. It's the broadcasters is kind of agreeing to a common courtesy. It's not an easy to figure out who gets the conch in Lord of the Rings, or Lord of the, what was that book called?
Flies.
Do you remember?
Lord of the
Yeah,
Flies.
there you
Lord of
go.
the
Who's
Flies.
gonna get
In the
the
Lord of the
conch?
Rings, you get something else.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not sure. The ring, maybe. Sorry. Digress. One thing I wanted to ask, and I'll start with Princell, but maybe go around. But if you have better, more actionable, easier to understand, more dynamic information, what decisions does that help you make more easily and more quickly that then has a result or has an effect on revenue or the bottom line?
Well, I think, when you look at, ad sales, there's a tremendous amount of value in information and having information. It helps advertisers, make those informed decisions about where to put their advertising budgets. On the digital side, a lot of our reporting dashboards have visual components to them. by way of just simple charts and graphs to show clients how campaigns are performing, if their ads are effective, kind of how things are trending. And it's also, I think, useful in our ability to get renewal business. We can show a proof of performance. Say, here's how your ad did, and you sold 2.3 more cars in your market because of this particular ad. We can kind of almost draw a line to the advertising and the actual action from the advertising. So I think that's how it can really be helpful.
Paige, I have a real example that happened this week that I'd love to share. And I'm not going to name any companies' names to protect their privacy, but this actually happened to me. I have a client, a very large East Coast client, that said they, were looking at streaming from a media company. And one company had a slick dashboard, not going to name any names, that was very easy for them with very transparent access to their data. And they were willing to pay a higher CPM, $35 CPM, versus going to a publisher at $22 to $25 CPM because of the ease of use of the data. Like, that's a real example of how important data visualization is. Like, they were literally willing to pay a higher CPM for this dashboard because of how easy it was to access the analytics.
What's your reaction to that, Princell? Like, what do you think about that? Is it worth that?
It's funny when Nicole was,
you know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't. But when you were walking us through that example, I thought of, kind of how I watch streaming services, and you look at, you compare the different, whether it's Apple TV or Prime, Amazon Prime, or Netflix, or what have you. And then you look at the CTV, you look at all of the different dashboards, and I find myself gravitating to the streaming services that are just easier to use and easier to navigate. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a real thing. The ease of use is something that I think is important for these companies to think about.
Yeah, that is huge, I think. And it's something that I think is easily overlooked. Like, you wouldn't really consider it in the overall. It's kind of like merchandising, like you choose to go to one store or another just because you like the presentation better, even though the merchandise is sort of the same. Right. Nicole, I wanted to ask you kind of along the lines of what I asked Princell, but for your clients, are there places where you see gaps where you say, look, you've got this data, but you don't know how to use it, so you're missing out on this opportunity? And are there ways in which you go in and try to help them fill those gaps so that they aren't missing out on those opportunities?
All the time. All the time. I think it's the biggest opportunity for someone to come in and swoop up this business. Is the challenge, though, is that the data suppliers don't want to play in the same sandbox together in many cases. They want to use their dashboard. So now you got 20 dashboards, 20 different data sources, and trying to aggregate them, that's the hard part. So like home service companies use Service Titan. Service Titan has call-in data. You want to mirror that up with your spot times. See, what was the direct relationship between when my spots aired versus what sort of lead gen did it create? Have it go all the way through to CRM. That's the client would love that. In the world today, I've yet to see a tech company come forward and figure this out, to be honest. If you guys know one, let me hear. I want to hear it. But I've yet to hear a tech company come in and figure out how to get these data suppliers to loosen the reins and play in the sandbox together. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges. So,
and that's just about being proprietary, right? Like, they just don't want to release.
Yeah, probably. But one company that stands out for Churi is an AI company that you might have saw at NAB. They have a product they have gotten farther than others that I've seen in terms of getting like Nielsen and Scarborough and different data sources to come into one sandbox together and then start overlaying things. But in my world, a lot of times we're doing it manually. We have a data visualization team that we've set up. We've made the investment and we source those data pieces together, and we help tell the story for the client through our resources.
Okay.
Another aspect of this that underlies this is, there's new opportunities that are out there, and talking about tech providers and people coming into the space. For local broadcasters, pricing has always been a core component of this. but the tools and data to do dynamic pricing is an emerging opportunity so that people are pricing optimally, managing inventory, and now managing inventory across disparate platforms, both digital, streaming, and broadcast becomes an opportunity, but it's data and a lot of data that needs to be analyzed to determine the effectiveness of which platform can you produce the optimal cost outcome on by placing those ads across them. And then, yeah, the complexity of the digital sale is it's yield that's important, because placing those yields, those targeted ads on digital platforms costs money, and determining the true yield on digital ads that you're placing becomes an important part of the decision. All of that data becomes part of the data visualization opportunity.
Al, just going back to dynamic pricing for 1 second, which is a little bit off this topic, but in the realm. But where do you think the industry is on dynamic pricing? Because I know even a couple of years ago, I had a long conversation with a station executive, and they were really into this idea of dynamic pricing, and it makes a ton of sense. But I don't know that we've actually gotten there in any way.
Aware of multiple broadcasters who are using dynamic pricing, producing dynamic rate cards, and experiencing proven results of increasing revenue as a result of using the science to help them with their pricing decisions. So I think, to your point, I don't know how broadly it's adopted across the industry, but the capability is certainly there, and one that could produce good outcome for most people.
Well, it seems like in an election year that it would be even all the more important, right? And just also, Al, while we're on this, just tell everyone what we mean by dynamic pricing.
It's just it's a tool that aggregates historical pricing information into an analytics tool that creates algorithms that produces an outcome in terms of what the optimal price is per time period, per program, per audience.
So we're not leaving money on the table. And then, Princell, is this something that you guys are using?
It's not something that we use currently, but it's certainly something that we're looking at. And the bottom line here is that any data that you can get your hands on to try and optimize engagement and pricing, we're looking at all of those tools.
Okay, so we have a question from Mark Gorman, which is, and I'll start with Al on this, which is, and then go to Princell. Why don't traditional media companies take the lead on this instead of following agencies' lead?
I think I don't have a great answer, but you underscore the word traditional. A lot of people are very set in their ways and following the path. It's difficult to get people to invest in the technology because it's a fixed cost business, and people are trying to maximize profitability. And I think that the third thing is the difficulty of getting at the data, moving the data around, and consuming the data you need to produce, to take advantage of these tools. So I think there's hurdles to getting there, but opportunities for people to take advantage of.
Princell, do you want to jump in? You don't have to.
No, I think Al summed it up. I mean, technological advances, I think, need to occur in order for us to be able to take the lead on this. I mean, look, in a lot of cases, we are following the agencies because that's kind of been the tradition. That's kind of how things have worked. And companies like ours, in fact, are taking the opportunity to lead where it makes sense. We recently made a move over from Nielsen to video amps in our networks and contents division because of the different methods of measurements. We believe that video amp is more accurate than Nielsen. 40 million homes versus 400 or 44,000. So I think in certain situations you see companies trying to kind of move the ball forward, but it's difficult.
Okay, so we have 5 more minutes, and I'm going to ask a 45-minute question. So it's not really well advised. But I'm going to start with Nicole. And
Uh-oh.
I'm going to say the two big letters, which are AI. So where does AI, artificial intelligence, figure in all this? And are there some sort of either specific areas and or tools that you think people should know about? And I know we had a pre-call and you were like, I have 100 tools I could mention, so don't mention 100, but
The answer is yes. Get on the AI train as fast as possible. AI is not going to replace people's jobs. People who use AI are going to replace people who don't. That's the bottom line. You're just asking me brass tacks. That's what I would say. Here's the challenge with AI is you need closed data. Because of the proprietary nature of a lot of data sources, you want to use closed paid walled AI tools where you're controlling the inputs and the outputs, right? So yeah, ChatGPT obviously is a go-to, but you gotta be careful with that. And when it comes to data visualization, there's so many tools. I was looking at one the other day that can create headshots for you. For LinkedIn, you upload 9 photos of yourself at a couple weddings and parties, and it makes you a beautiful business headshot. I mean, there's lots of really cool.
You can do that on Midjourney, really, but
I actually ran it through another AI tool just to have people like vote on which picture was better. Could you tell which one was AI? Photoshop has an AI integration. Adobe. I was talking to my data visualization team. What are they using? I mean, they use some stuff, the Visual Finder in ChatGPT 4, I think, which is paid wall. There's lots of great tools out there, and there's new ones popping up every single day. But it takes bandwidth and it takes a team if you don't have an AI committee at your company, it's something you should really be looking at to vet these tools and try them out for size and find efficiencies.
And then I'll ask you, but I might go back to Nicole, but are there also AI tools that, like she's talking a lot about actual like visualization tools like in Photoshop, for example, or even like ChatGPT, content creation kind of tools. But are there AI tools that you can use to process data and to make data more accessible to people?
So there are tools that can help you get access to the data, automate the process of populating other data sources. And then, yes, the power of the AI really comes with predicting outcomes. And again, the speculation is this is going to replace people. In the local broadcast world, it's not going to replace people. You still need a local seller out on the street selling the value proposition of local broadcast. But can these AI tools help people? Yes, it will help streamline the process. It will help people get the data more quickly. And just like the discussion about dynamic pricing, it'll predict outcomes, but you still need a human to say, does this make sense? Is there, is this coming up with a rational, logical conclusion? And, you should use the AI and leverage it, and it will help you. But again, you still need someone to view this. And I think one of the huge opportunities in the broadcast industry is in the sales process, because can you get a seller to go out in the street and say, build me a proposal for this day part to reach this audience with this frequency, and have an AI tool build a proposal for you is going to save people so much time and effort. And the tools can do that. And again, it's not going to replace that person. It's going to help that person do his job more effectively.
Okay. All right. Last question. Okay. Last question, because we have 1 minute. Sorry to cut you off, but from Brenda, and then we're going to wrap it up, and I'll start with Princell. Can media companies work together to demand better systems? Do you think there'd be collaboration here to improve this whole process?
I think there absolutely has to be collaboration. That's the only way we're all going to survive.
All right. Collaboration to survive, and we're done. Thank you so much, you guys. It was awesome. It was really interesting. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you for having us.